I convinced myself that I could become an airline pilot, and I'm going to convince you guys that you can too. Now, first and foremost, who's this young Asian guy telling me that it is possible for me, against all odds, to become an airline pilot? I am an airline pilot, and I work with aspiring airline pilots to help them pursue their careers into the aviation industry. And the first thing I want to make known to you guys is that despite all of the odds, I managed to do it. So I want you to know that it is also feasible for you too. Now, where am I coming from with regards to all of this? Well, my background basically tailors me to be completely against becoming a pilot. And what I mean by that is I have so many factors at play that would stop me and were preventing me from pursuing my dreams of becoming an airline pilot. So I want to convince you guys that it is also, no matter what position you're in, even if you feel the same way, it is also possible for you. Now, I can literally list off all of the deterrents that was stopping me from being a pilot. First of all, I'm from an Asian background. My parents are Asian. Their definition of success is if you're a doctor or a lawyer, and I wasn't pursuing either career path. I was trying to become an airline pilot, which is in a completely different industry to what they were expecting. And yeah, I had to convince my parents. How did I convince my parents? Well, I essentially told them that this was a dream that was deep rooted within me. That was something that I always wanted to do. I was fortunate enough to have understanding parents that also wanted to support me in my endeavors and in my journey towards becoming an airline pilot. And thankfully, I did manage to convince them, and I did manage to persuade them that it is going to be feasible as long as we work through it together. So what did we do? We did that. We did exactly that. We worked through it, and we worked through the structure together. However, that is the first reason why I would have potentially not pursued the career of being a pilot, because I knew that my parents had a particular standard that they wanted me to follow. They wanted me to go to university. They wanted me to do all of these things that were not necessarily required to become an airline pilot. So I had to convince them that it was just unnecessary. Going to uni, going to all of these things, doing extra areas around the academia side of things wasn't necessarily important for me with regards to my career of becoming a pilot. And so I had to convince them of that, and I did that using evidence-based reasoning. I told them, this is what the flight school require, this is what pilot licenses are needed. You have to do your research. Otherwise, how are your parents going to believe anything that you say? And not only that, you also have to prove to your parents that you're someone that can be relied upon. One thing that people miss out is the fact that, well, I have all of these evidences as to why being a pilot would be a good idea, but they've never in their life shown their parents how reliable they are as an individual with regards to the decision making that they make. Now, I was a relatively good boy. I'll be completely frank with you guys. I didn't mess around too much, and my parents knew that. I was always going to school, having my attendance high, was always listening to teachers. Now, yeah, I didn't perform very, very well in school at times, and I've mentioned it in previous videos. I was literally one of the lowest performing students in my entire year group. My parents knew that. They knew that I was struggling at school. However, they could see that I was trying. And this is what I really want you guys to take home, especially if you're younger. Really think about how I can not only impress upon my parents how I am a good person in terms of I'm making the right decisions, I'm always consciously trying to be better, but also for yourself. Prove to yourself that you are going to continue to try to be better, continue to try and do more for yourself, so that when it comes to making these big decisions for yourself, you're going to be very, very headstrong in that you're making the right decisions. Because if, for example, you go your whole life making bad decisions, and then you go to your parents and say, oh, I want to be an airline pilot, and this is the reasoning why I want to do it. And yeah, the reasonings might be great, but your track record shows that your decision making has not been great up until this point. So I really want to emphasize, make the right decisions, even from an earlier stage, outside of the academia side of things. Make the right decisions in your life, and your parents will respect that. Everybody around you will respect that. And then when it comes to making the decisions, they'll be supportive of your decision making. So that was one element and one area I had to convince in my life that was going to be fruitful and prosperous towards my career of becoming an airline pilot. And that was a tough area. I'll be completely frank. I know a lot of you guys who I've spoken to have been in a similar position where it's been difficult to convince your parents that you are going to become an airline pilot and that you want that more than going to uni, more than going to these things, because parents naturally want to be very protective over their children, and that is completely understandable. They want you to follow a standard and logical and structured route that everybody has followed because it's the safe route, and that is completely understandable. I would think the same thing if I was a parent. However, when it comes to being a pilot, and like I say, if you have convinced them and you have shown through your decision making outside of the academia side of things that you've made the right decisions, then they will also, I'm sure, be supportive of you making the right decisions within your work and your career prospects. Now, another deterrent and another reason I had to convince myself that it was possible was I was from a Pakistani Muslim background. Now, I don't know about you guys, but in the UK, there are very few Pakistani Muslim pilots. And in fact, in my local town, I didn't know any pilots whatsoever. So trying to find a British Muslim Pakistani pilot was even more difficult. This is exactly why I have this platform, because I want to show you guys that there is some of us out there. But ultimately, it is incredibly limiting in terms of a young man's mind to say, well, I want to be a pilot, and I've not seen anybody else in my field or in my background or from my background do it, and yet I still want to pursue it. Now, that was tough. That was a tough barrier I had to get through within my mental capacity. I had to convince myself that despite my background, I can still do it. I know I can do it. And yeah, with regards to my religious background and those kind of things, I've had things throughout the entirety of my career thrown in my face. Oh, you shouldn't be a pilot. You shouldn't do this. You're Muslim. You're this, you're that. And yeah, it happens. Ultimately, you get very, very thick skin from it, and you get all of these jokes thrown your way, and you just take them with your stride, and you just ignore them, and you keep going, and you prove them wrong. Honestly, one of the most empowering things I've found is proving people wrong when it comes to those limiting beliefs they try to enforce upon you. So really say to yourself, I don't care what these people say. Ultimately, this is my life. I'm going to have one crack at this life, and I'm going to make sure I do whatever I can to live it to its absolute fullest. And I'm not going to let anyone convince me otherwise. So there is almost a delusional conviction to your goal of becoming a pilot that every pilot needs, to know that no matter what anybody says externally, this is going to be something that you are not going to budge on. That no matter what anyone says, no matter what external factors are at play, no matter who is out there telling you can't do it, tell yourself, because you are your own self's best friend, tell yourself that it is possible. And that is something I had to do. I had to convince myself that despite having no external people and no role models to look up to, I said to myself, I'm going to still pursue this career, because I know that if I am convicted in it, and if I can get the right information and I can follow and make the right decisions, then I can definitely achieve my goal of being a pilot, because people have achieved it. People have throughout history gotten to these positions in a very, very feasible amount of time. So why can't I? And that was another thing I had to convince myself of. Why can't I do it? There's so many people out there that have done it. So why can't I do it? I'm a human being, the same as anybody else. My anatomy has been built the exact same as anybody else. So what is stopping me from doing it? I had a really, really tough time convincing myself of this, because I don't know what it was. When I was younger, when I was about 15, 16 years old, I naturally thought, because I was performing so badly in my school, which was predominantly Caucasian backgrounds and quite upper class students. I was from a grammar school, and it was an all-boys school. And I was one of the few minority students, one of the few Asian guys. And naturally, I was performing worse than all of these other guys. So I just thought to myself, in my head, maybe it's just because I'm Asian and my genetics are just not as good as these guys. Maybe I've just not got what it takes genetically. Maybe it's not even my fault. So I started pointing fingers at my DNA makeup. And that sounds crazy, I know. But I did. I genuinely thought to myself, maybe it's because I'm just not as naturally gifted as these guys. And that was a massive limiting belief I put on myself. And I had to really, really convince myself that this was not the case. So what did I do? Thankfully, I joined a boxing club. And in that boxing club, I learned some really, really valuable lessons. I learned teamwork, leadership. I learned about valuing my own self and about learning, development, growth. I learned about all of these things and what it took in order to get and obtain a progressive increase in skill. And what I learned from it was that it requires dedication, hard work, and consistency. Consistently going to the gym and improving and taking feedback and understanding where the feedback's coming from and improving upon it and just building and building and building and compounding. That is what I took from boxing. And I love that sport. I love that sport, and I love all sports because they teach you that. I think most sportsmen understand this, that there is only going to be progression with hard graft, hard work. And that's something I really respect from a lot of athletes and sports people, that they understand that that's what it takes. They understand that putting in the work on the track before the lights are on you, that is where the real work happens. And that's where you become whatever you want to become. And it was the same when it comes to the academic side of things. I realized that I'm not going to just naturally get this information lodged into my head. I had to really put the work in, and something that I encourage you guys to do constantly. If you are weak in certain areas, constantly try and work on it. Even if it's really painful for you, just keep working on it, because you'll find that over time it will become easier and easier. And our brains are just wired to continuously repeat tasks over and over to fortify those neurological pathways to that bit of information. So ultimately, repetition, consistency, that's how you're going to improve as an individual. And that's something I had to convince myself of. I had to really convince myself that it wasn't just a natural thing that people were gifted, but it was that they were putting in more work than me. So I needed to put in, if not more, but at least the same amount of work that they were putting in order to improve and excel at the same level. But ultimately, I decided I'm going to put in more work because I was further behind than them all. So I really, really grafted in my younger years. Between 10 years old to about 18 years old, I can pretty much guarantee you some of my friends had seen this. I was really, really working hard. Some of my friends at lunch and break time would see me in the library reading, see me in the library working, and they would make fun of me for it. It was obviously in the light-hearted environment of your friendship group. However, they would make fun, saying, "Oh, why are you always working? Why are you do?" And to be honest, I don't regret it. I know at the time I was thinking, oh, like I only live once, so I might enjoy, spending some time with them, playing in the field, football and whatnot. But then I thought to myself, well, I really also want to become a pilot, and I really want to excel in my exams and excel in my career. So I need to also work hard now as well, because that is going to be the long-term goal for myself. So I did. I worked hard and I don't regret it. I honestly will tell you now, I do not regret it. I'm still friends with those guys. They've not gone anywhere. And in the same breath with you guys, if you're struggling at school, really put in the work. It's so important to lock in at this time, because maybe some of the subjects won't be applicable to becoming a pilot. However, the learning methodologies will be. Because even for me, I was doing maths, English and physics. English hasn't got too much to do with becoming a pilot. However, that was one of the subjects I enjoyed the most and I put the most work into. And I learned how to study through English. I literally learned how to study, and I realized I performed the best in English. And that was because I realized that enjoying a subject is even more important than sitting down and revising it. Actually sitting there, enjoying what you're revising is actually going to make you retain the information longer. I don't know if you guys have ever heard a song that really, really tickles that enjoyment inside of you. But if you have heard any song that you really, really enjoy, you will find that you'll remember that song a lot more easily than a song that doesn't necessarily have the same impact. So I would really encourage you guys to approach any learning with that mind frame that it's going to be fun. Now, there was a really, really key area in order to convince myself that it is possible to be an airline pilot. And that key area and that key word that I hang on to, and I encourage you guys to pursue is doing the word research. It's so important. Honestly, no matter what you do, when it comes to convincing yourself mentally that it is possible to pursue a career like becoming a pilot, you need to do the research. Now, what I mean by that is not necessarily just specifically Google, ChatGPT, YouTube, but actually physically speaking to people who will give you feedback, who will give you, oh, I have a question. What do I do in this particular situation? And will give you a personalized response. That's really important. And it's hard. I know it's hard because I had the same challenge. I was someone from a background that there weren't many Asian pilots out there. There weren't many Muslim pilots. And not only that, there wasn't really any pilots that I could speak to. I was in a really derelict town. It was a very private area. There was not many people that I knew who were in the industry at all. And the only people I could speak to initially were just military people, and they weren't really in the industry I was looking to be in. They were in the military area, and of course they gave me some really, really valuable advice, but it would be tailored towards a military outlook. And I wanted to be an airline pilot. I wanted to fly commercially. I didn't want to go into the military. So it was a really big challenge trying to find someone that was in the industry. But I encourage and I urge you to find someone. Of course, I can offer that help if you book a call with me through the link in the description. That's absolutely fine. However, if you don't want to speak to me and we can't work together, then speak to someone else. Outsource through Instagram, through wherever you can get information from a person that may be able to help you in your journey. And research is the most important asset that we have to convince ourselves that it is possible. Researching the fact that there are Asian pilots, researching the fact that there is methods of getting the money, researching the fact that there may not be people in your family who have become pilots, but there are other people who are in the same position whose parents weren't pilots and it was possible for them. And that is the ultimate focus that I had to really, really delve into when I came to convincing myself that it was possible. Now, there are 3 key steps to convincing yourself and being convicted in the pathway towards becoming an airline pilot. Now, one thing that I held my hat onto throughout the entirety of my training, despite having ups, downs, everything, I held my hat on this one phrase. They've all done it, so why can't I? That was one particular phrase that I held on to massively. There are people that have done it before me, so why can't I do it? And I really, really heavily relied upon that statement. It was, of course, going to have difficult times. It was, of course, not going to be easy. But I knew that I wasn't the only one that had felt this particular experience in my life. Yes, we all have our personal experiences and journey towards becoming an airline pilot. And no one journey is the same, but people have done it, so why can't I? Now, the second fundamental support network that I had to help me endeavor in becoming an airline pilot was exposing myself to worse situations. And what I mean by that is, before I started my journey towards becoming an airline pilot, as you guys may know, I was working at Sainsbury's, which is a local retail convenience store in the UK. I was working in a supermarket. Now, yeah, there's so much nobility in working in environments like that. You learn so many valuable skills as a young person. And I encourage and urge all of you, if you're not working and you're about 16, 17 years old, get a job. Even if you can't see the benefit financially to having a job because you're well off, get a job. Honestly, it's so, so valuable. Not for the money. Don't get it for the money. Honestly, even if it's charity and it's volunteering, get it for the sake of building upon your skills. I'm working with clients at the moment, and I literally tell all of them, you need to do something that's not to do with academics, that's not to do with sports, but that's to do with waking up in the morning, clocking into work, following orders from a manager. It's so important that you value that particular experience more than the financial element of it. yeah, you might be earning really, really bad money in terms of working for this particular place. But the benefit and the value that you're going to get is not through the financial areas. It's going to be through the actual skills that you develop through working in this particular industry that you will be working in. I really encourage you guys to do that. And it's not only from a skills point of view, it will also give you a perspective. Working in the supermarket was not something I could do for 40, 50 years until I retire. I knew that within about 3 months of working in the supermarket. And that's no disrespect to anybody that's working in supermarkets, because I know that there's so much value in it. I loved the job. I know when I retire, that would be something that I would potentially enjoy doing from a part-time point of view, not for the money, but just for fun, because I enjoyed speaking with people and I enjoyed the customer interaction. But in terms of a career, I could never see myself having a career in that part of life, solely due to the fact that I was becoming insanely bored with the job. It is a job that it requires no cognitive understanding. And we are young people with a really, really strong organ known as the brain. And if you're in a position where you're pursuing becoming an airline pilot, then I can pretty much guarantee that you are utilizing your brain already to a very, very high level. And if you go into a career that's not going to challenge you mentally, like, for example, just scanning items across a till, you're going to find that your brain is going to be at a massive, massive detriment. And you want to continuously challenge this brain. This is something that people really neglect. They want a job that's easy. No, you don't. Actually, what you want and what is good for you is not a job that's easy. It's a job that you're always progressing and learning in. That is, for me, the most important mindset to have when it comes to choosing a career path. If you choose a particular airline or progressive career path that allows you to develop this organ of yours, then you're always going to be enjoying the job, because it's going to be continuously adapting you. It's going to be continuously changing you as a human being. And that is where I find is the most fun in terms of a career. If I'm going to be just doing the same thing over and over and over again, then I know that I'm going to get bored of it eventually. It's like when we're children and our long-term goal is to become a footballer. Now, why? Yeah, the status is fantastic. All of these things are fantastic. Sports is fun. And why is sports fun? Because it's constantly changing. When you're in a football game, there is no 1-2 football games that are the same. And if you can approach that within work, if you can go to work and say, today is going to be something that is different, every day is going to be different, then I can guarantee you're going to enjoy your job. I absolutely love being a pilot. I love it because of the fact that every day is different. And that is where I think the most value in a career is. However, if I said to myself, I'm just going to work in a supermarket and scan tills across a desk every day, I know that there's not going to be any day that's any different, and I think that would be at my detriment. Now, of course, yeah, you meet different customers, those kind of things. That's really, really valuable too. However, I find that it gives you a perspective on the area of life which shows you don't want to end up in a position where you're doing the same thing over and over again. You want to be in a career that's going to progress you. Now, the third key fundamental area for me that helped convince me that I could become a pilot was my support system. It was my family. It was my friends. They were all so important on my journey towards becoming a pilot, and for me to convince myself that it is possible. If I didn't have a supportive family besides me, then I know that I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in today. So really utilize and fall back on your family if you can. Now, I know that there are guys out there that don't have that support system. So what can you do instead? Well, if you don't have anyone around you, then what you can do is become your own best friend. And there's a little trick that a particular psychiatrist taught in terms of decision making. Now, what he says is, in life, you're going to have decisions that come your way. And what you should do, if you have no one to help you make these decisions, and generally, I feel like this is the best decision-making process out there because I utilize it on a day-to-day. I can't always go to my family about decisions that I make, but I think this is a really, really important and valuable way to make a decision. But if you imagine yourself as the main character, and we're all we can do that very easily as human beings. We imagine ourselves as the main character in this big story of life. When a decision comes your way, a difficult decision, if you imagine taking yourself out of this main character and you are now the audience of this story, you're watching Adam's life play out in front of you. If you are now the audience and you say to yourself, what would the audience want this person to do next? Because you externalize that decision-making process. We're very good at giving advice to other people. I'm also guilty of this. I'm giving advice to you guys, and I know that some of the advice I can't always take up every single day. And that's completely natural as human beings. We are good at giving advice, but we're very, very bad at taking advice for ourselves. So what we do is we externalize it. We take ourselves out of our own shoes and we watch our own life. Oh, should I go to university or should I just go straight into flight school? Take yourself out of that decision and say to yourself, if I was an audience watching this guy's life, watching his life story, what would I be screaming to the camera telling him to do? What would I be saying to Adam to do with his life? I don't know. It's up to you guys how you make that decision-making process work for you. But I ultimately feel that if you don't have a support system, that is one of the best ways to approach a decision-making process. Now, I hope that this has been of some benefit to you guys. It's a pretty long video and I apologize for that. I hope that you've taken some useful insights from it. I will continue to give you guys advice and information. If you need any help towards becoming an airline pilot, feel free to book in a call with myself through the link in the description. Thank you very much for watching and I'll see you guys very, very soon.